Welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We are the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who I don't believe is created out of cadaverous parts, but I can't be too sure. My sister, Meredith. How's it going, Mer?
It's great. Now that the sound is back and all of that is working.
Yes.
It
Yes,
was
working through
weird.
technical difficulties is always fun, but we're up. Well, we have finished Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We've done it.
We did it.
Over 100 episodes, and yeah, how many books?
Frankenstein didn't take 100 episodes.
I always forget how many books we actually have.
Quite a few.
There are quite a few. Let me see. So Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which didn't take quite as long as our last books that we've done.
Yeah, well, I thought it'd be a great book to do. It's relatively short. I mean, we have been working on it since May, but that's an us thing, not a book thing.
Correct, exactly. 6. Let's see. We had this was book number, let's see, 12? This is our 12th book.
Wow.
Can you believe
A
that?
dozen books, 100 episodes, a dozen books. Look at that.
It's those are nice numbers. I like both
They
of
are.
those. Definitely. So yeah, 2.5 years of the podcast, 100 episodes in the can, and 12 books complete. And today we're going to talk about the 12th book, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then at the end of the podcast, I guess just in time for spooky season, we will reveal our 13th book, which, unlike past Octobers, will not be a horror novel. Which is
Kind of.
good. Well, perhaps. Well, yes, not quote unquote gothic horror. We did previous Octobers. We did Dracula, and we did what did we do the other October? Something scary, didn't we?
Um, oh, Island of Dr. Moreau.
Was that the other October that we did?
Was that
The
in
other-
October? Yeah.
Other
I think
scary
so.
October book? I think it might have been. But yeah, we're not going to tackle a outright horror book. So we will keep that tease going until the end of the episode. So listen to the whole thing to find out what the next book is. Or it'll probably be in the show notes. I don't know. You could probably just look down there. Anyway. All right. So we're going to talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This was an interesting book. You have read this many times.
Many times.
This was my first read through. I've not read this book before, or had not read this book before. I have read it now. And so let's just talk real quick. It was the story of Dr. Victor Frankenstein, who had this quest to create life and poured himself into creating this monster, this creature out of dead body parts. Once it was created, however, he lost control of it, and it disappeared and did its own thing for a while until it accidentally murdered his brother and friend, or murdered his brother, and then his friend gets framed for it, and then she gets killed by the state.
She gets executed, yeah.
Correct. And he decides to go after and murder the creature, but cannot, and the creature then implores him to end his lonely misery and create a companion for him, which he agrees to and begins to do, but then thinks better of it, and because he believes it will also be as evil as his creation, and destroys it, which then sends the monster into a rage, and he vows to make Frankenstein's life as lonely and miserable as his own, ends up killing Frankenstein's best friend as well as his bride on their wedding night, and Frankenstein then spends the rest of his days on Earth chasing the monster until his, I guess you could say, his own rage and quest consumes him, and he dies from exhaustion and fatigue in this pursuit. And then the monster, we learn, decides that he is then done. He has accomplished his mission of making his creator miserable, and now that his creator is gone, he has no reason to live, and he goes off to kill himself.
So he says.
We do not see him again. There wasn't a sequel, was there? She didn't write Frankenstein 2. right?
No,
Monster
she
returns.
didn't.
See, if this book was written in modern times, the ending sets you up for a sequel, and
Right,
the
because you
monster's
don't
going to come
see
back.
him.
Right. So there's no
He says
closure.
he's going to light himself on fire.
But does he? Anyway,
That's
so all this is built around the framing story of being backtold to a ship captain who is searching for the North Pole, and that's how we learn. He's the last eyewitness to the monster as he runs off into the nowheres.
so. What did you think overall? I've read it so many times, and it's got to be one of my favorites at this point.
Yeah. So I found it. Should we do our ratings now, or we'll save the ratings? I will say overall, I found this to be one of our most difficult books to read.
Interesting.
Yeah,
In what way?
in the technical way it was written. So I think so story wise, obviously it's a very classic story, and the Frankenstein's monster is obviously an indelible icon in Western culture and maybe I don't know maybe even culture of the world in through movies and television and whatnot. Everybody knows it's a Frankenstein's monster. The word Frankenstein has come to mean anything that's assembled out of you see a car that has like mismatched doors and
Right.
you say it's been Frankensteined together, right? It's a verb. So I think the core story of this genius creating the monster and the monsters, it's a very human story, right? The monster's search
Right.
for why am I here? What is my purpose? Why was I created? You
With
know,
whom shall I spend my life? Who will
right?
be my companion?
Why
Who
why
will
has my
love me?
creator rejected me?
Right.
Why am I not loved by my creator? These are all very human things that I think from the beginning of time that people tap into, right? It's the eternal human question. Why are we here? So I think from that aspect, the book does a great job of bringing up all these wild questions. Questions of acceptance and society. The monster, even though he looks hideous, he is loves people and he wants to have friends and he wants to interact with people, but at every turn he is vilified and rejected by
Right.
society,
Right.
right?
He loves art, beauty, nature.
Yes,
He loves all of the things you're supposed to love.
right. He's a gentle soul, and he says that he was created to love and to be and to have this capacity for kindness, basically. So from the creature's perspective, so that question of are we born good or born evil? Man is so the creature you could say was born good. Well, I mean we can get into sort of other aspects of obviously this is a Western book, so it's from a Western religious perspective. But as far as I found it extremely difficult to read, it was tedious. The
Wow.
the language was, I think, overly florid. I mean, yes, it was written in 1820 ish, right? Revised through the early 1800s.
Right, right.
But we've read other books. Like Dracula was contemporaneous with this, and I think Dracula was written in a much more straightforward fashion.
Think so?
I think so, yeah.
Man.
Other books we've read were later. This was probably this and Frankenstein are the earliest books we've read so far. Our next one, so it'll be interesting to contrast with our next one. Little teaser hint. Our next one's also going to be from this sort of time period, so we'll see how difficult that is to read. But yeah, I just felt her language was overly florid. Her sentence structure was it was backward sentence construction sometimes. Instead of saying something
Hmm.
in a straightforward way, she would say it in a sort of roundabout way, if you catch my meaning. So, yeah, just from a technical reading aspect, I found it very difficult to
Hmm.
read.
See, I feel fully opposite
Really?
about,
Hmm.
especially in comparison. I found Dracula to be very difficult, and
Oh, really?
and Dracula, I yeah, I found Dracula to be really difficult. Now, it was early in the podcast. I might have still been pregnant. And so, like, getting air and breath enough to read might have been an issue.
Right.
But I found myself, I found myself feeling like the language of Frankenstein kind of just like, well, maybe it's going too far to say it kind of just fell out of my mouth because there were words that tripped me up, and I did not say places or locations. Books books of this time period, as we know, sometimes also serve as like travel log, even if they're
Right.
not technically a travel log, because people wanted that.
Sure.
They didn't necessarily get to go places where they wanted. Anyway, I felt like every time I read it, I was just like awed by the language and
Wow.
thought it was incredible to be reading it. And it felt like and the analogy of an excellent meal to be reading it aloud.
Really?
Yeah, I
Wow.
don't know. I really thought you were going to feel the same way.
No, I did not enjoy reading this one aloud at all. I
Wow.
I wonder, even reading it silently, I don't. I had to really engage with some of the sentence structure. I think that was where I had a lot of problems.
Hmm.
You know, because she would use a lot of, instead of just saying something, she would say like double negatives, and
Mm.
it was surely not that this would be the way that you would have me do, but I want, instead of just saying, yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
do
yeah.
this. Yeah. So yeah, so reading it, I thought was very difficult. I thought it was a little bit, and maybe this was just the style of the times. I mean, it was unnecessary. I think she could have just used an omniscient narrator as opposed to the I'm I'm the guy on the ship writing to my sister, and I picked up
Oh, yeah.
Frankenstein, and he's telling me a story, and then he's telling me the story that the monster told him, and
Yeah. The
it's like,
the epistolary fiction aspect of it was, I think it was like a thing.
yeah,
It it was a popular thing to do, and it I guess almost made sense. It's like, how would you know? Like, novels aren't, I don't, they're not new,
right.
but like novels aren't like, people are like, oh, you're reading a novel? That's a bunch
Northanger
of
Abbey. That's the
junk.
other one. That's the other one from this time
Yeah,
period that we
yeah,
read.
Northanger Abbey.
I
Yeah.
thought that was super easy to read, or not super easy, but but more straightforward, and you know the the sentence structure there, I think, lent itself to the wit of Jane Austen, as opposed to
Mm.
this. I felt just was confusing a lot of
Yeah,
times
this doesn't have
unnecessarily.
much wit.
No,
This has no wit
not at
about
all.
it.
And that, like you said, that the epistolary style, contrasting that with the other book that we've read, Dracula, which again contemporaneous, written in that
Yeah.
same style. I think there that style lent itself to the air of mystery, because in that Dracula was not a character. He was the thing everyone was observing, right? Like, there were
Mm.
only a handful of scenes, where Jonathan interacted with Dracula in the very beginning, and then like they saw him in the house in London, but otherwise it was
It's surprising how much he's not there.
right. It was conversations between everyone else, like trying to figure out what's going on, and the fact that Bram Stoker used that style because he would have a letter from someone saying something's happening, and then he would show you a chapter or two later, like the newspaper clipping that happened earlier or something. Like, you
Mm.
almost, it wasn't until the end of the book where he He just was going sort of linearly. But the fact that it was, at least in the beginning, sort of out, time jumps and out of sequential order, like you had to put it together a little bit. Like he showed you Jonathan's journey a little bit and then switched up the perspective, and you're bringing in these other pieces, like, oh, the newspaper clipping of the ship that's coming in, and then the bill of lading or whatever that had, a casket full of boxes of earth, and you're like,
Right.
oh, what is going on? Like, you're piecing it together as you go, whereas in this one, it was kind of unnecessary, you know? And because in the middle the monster was such a character as you're seeing his story in the hovel next to the family, the fact that it's him telling Frankenstein telling the guy writing to his sister, it's
Yeah,
I don't know, just
that part
unnecessary.
especially gets particularly removed
Right.
because it's Frankenstein. It's the creature relating the story of the family that's also relating the story
Right.
of Safi and how
Yeah.
they met.
Right,
So
exactly.
it's like the story gets relayed through the monster, gets told to Victor, gets told to Walton, gets told to his sister.
Right. I think she could have just switched perspectives through the story and changed narrator as she went without having, just left it as was and not have it like story from, you know what I mean? Like, anyway. So
That
I don't
that
think that served her well like it did, like it served Stoker and Dracula.
that move, and I'd have to do a little bit of research, but I feel this is true just from knowing what I know and reading how much I've read. But that move would have been, what's the word? Not avant-garde, but um,
Like switching
because
narrators.
yeah, because there's like a level of veracity or a level of like truth through the letters. It's
Mm,
not, it's like, okay, somebody heard this story and they're writing out the story, and here's how we're getting it, versus I'm in this person's brain, I'm in this person's brain, and it's just switching perspectives, and you're just inside the story that
like
has no conceit outside of
people
itself.
wouldn't have been able to comprehend it because of the fact that their media was letters basically. Like they didn't have television or movies or anything that we have nowadays. They only had the way they received information was through books and letters. So of course, if you're going to get this information of this story of this creature, it's going to be through a letter. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah,
saying?
versus you're inside the brain of a creature. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Interesting.
How would
Yeah, I
you?
don't know.
Yeah, I wonder what because this is like first half of 1800s is like 1818-ish.
Yeah, when the final
um
revisions were done. Yeah.
and I'm wondering, because we see Dracula's like that, we see Three Men in a Boat wasn't like that, but it was a travel log, so
Right.
almost the whole thing in and of itself was like a journal.
Right. Exactly.
um and so it wasn't meant to be a fiction, even though it was a fiction
Right.
for the most part, but it wasn't set up that way. It was like these dudes were going to take a trip.
Right.
I'm wondering what novels were not start. What am I looking for? I'm looking for words. Which novels? What earliest novels were what we think of as just straight fiction? There is no other conceit to it. There is no.
Well, I think, well, like we said, Northanger Abbey it was a straightforward novel. It was all from Catherine's perspective, right?
That's true. That's true. We
She
don't
had
get in
no
anyone else's head, though, do
no.
we?
I don't think so. No, we didn't.
No.
It was all seen from her perspective.
Even now, changing perspectives. I just read an excellent book that we can't read on the podcast because it's not in the public domain. But I don't even know if I can show the cover. I don't know. Ken Kesey's
Oh,
Sometimes a Great Notion. I
okay.
can't stop talking about this book. But you jump perspectives and inside people's brains with like no warning.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's italics to show you that you've gone into someone else's mind, but you just have to be in it. And
Right.
it's an amazing experience as a reader to be like, okay, I'm with this character and he's talking to this character. Oh, now I'm in this character's mind and I see what he's thinking during the conversation and I see what he's thinking during the conversation. And you get such an incredible, truly omniscient view, but it's
Right.
not used a third person omniscient.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
it's like you're in their mind and you have to pay attention to the shift. And it's I don't know. I love it. I love it.
Interesting. Okay. Check it out. Yeah, but so that's what I thought of it. Like I found it a tough read. I don't know.
Man.
Folks who were listening to it, you got to hear it live, or you got to hear it in your ears as opposed to seeing it on the page. Tell us how you thought. Send us a note and let us know if you thought it was easy to follow, having someone read it aloud, or if it was a little too confusing. I don't know. I don't know how it would be to as a listener to hear it.
All right, so that's the reading of it. What do you think
Right.
of the story, the concepts, the questions it presents?
Oh, I definitely think this is one you can dig so much out of. Not only just the sort of the why are we here, right? But like the nature of humanity and the nature of how we treat people in a society. Because at every step he just wanted to have friends. Like when he met the father in the
Mm-hmm.
cottage who was blind and who couldn't see his hideous figure, they were getting along fine and they were just talking, and he had a mind that had a capacity for intelligence and for learning. I guess that you can go into the nature versus nurture debate. Like he had no one nurturing him. He just had a brain that worked, and he figured things out on his own, and he had a thirst for knowledge and to figure out what was going on around him. I think it helped that he was a fully formed adult as opposed to a child. You know,
Right. Which
yeah,
is interesting that he wakes up. I mean, the part of the book where he is discovering, like, his eyes suddenly start to work and come into focus, and his ears, and he hears things, and he realizes that the birds and the moon, and he's discovers nature, and then has this reverence for it and appreciation for it, and he has to learn the things that are edible and not edible, and he
right,
discovers a fire left over, and I can do these, and so, like, he's nurtured in a way by natural beauty at first, and then he sees the family and he sees how that family interacts,
right,
and it's a loving and caring family, though not without sorrow, and they care about books and learning and education, and they care about, I guess you could say, Safi as an outsider, like, in a
yeah, I
way, and
suppose,
they
yeah.
they themselves are outsiders in that particular country because they've been exiled,
But she had worth because she was pretty, so you know
and her mom was a Christian.
this is true. Very true. Yeah, good point.
So there are those, like, weird little asterisks,
Right,
but I think on the whole, the lesson, despite those asterisks that are for the reading audience, for the creature in the story, he sees a family who's been exiled, who is taken in an outsider who works to bridge the gap. Like, they don't speak the same language at first,
right.
and I think
All the things he
that,
wanted to do.
right, and it's a good, even though he doesn't have any direct nurturing, it's good nurturing, and then his reality is not that.
Right, because she's hot and he isn't, so he gets rejected. Yeah,
If I could just be hot like Sappy.
exactly. Need to glow up the monster a little bit. Uh, I think there's also, from a modern perspective, I don't think Shelley intended any of this, but she's also sort of commenting on the nature of humanity and the brain and the soul in my mind, because
Hmm.
you know, if you look at the way she wrote the book, she's assuming that once the power gets turned off, right? Once the body dies, the brain apparently wipes the hard drive. Like there's nothing left. Because when the creature is animated, that brain came from a person, right?
Mm,
But the creature has no memory of his past life, whatever
that's a
whomever
good
he
point.
was before. Like he has no memories in there. He has no. So I could see a modern Frankenstein, being written where the creature struggles with that as well, like these memories and like who he was, and maybe things he had done in the past,
Mm,
and memories coming back to him, and maybe people he knew, and who is he, right? Like, is he the person that he was before he died, and the brain was put into this new body? Is he this wholly new thing? What and who is he in that search for that purpose that he has? And unfortunately, he strikes out, and his purpose becomes tormenting his creator. He never aspires to anything greater because of the rejection of society, which I think is something else that we can learn and take from the book. That when society continually tells you something,
mm,
eventually you believe it, and you just say, well, if society says I'm good for nothing but crime and poverty, then gosh darn it, I'm going to just become a criminal. And then you have the people that look at folks in jail like, oh, why don't you make something of yourself? And, well, the same reason the monster didn't make anything of himself, that he was continually rejected at every turn by society, and the world told him all you're good for is evil and mischief. And so he then said, look, I took no joy in it, but I leaned in, and that's what I did.
yeah.
You know?
I hadn't even thought about like that's some like Black Mirror stuff right there. I know you don't watch TV, but um
Right.
or Netflix or anything, but like the idea that the brain came from someone, and what happened to whatever that someone's memories, and the neurons firing and creating connections that didn't exist. So the nature of consciousness is then, once it's out
Right.
in this book anyway. Like the old consciousness did not get renewed. It's a new one in this
Right.
new form, in this new body.
And where did that
um
come from? What happened to the old soul, and how did
yeah,
Frankenstein place a new clean slate soul into this creature?
or new consciousness in some way.
Right.
Like I get, like there's one thing that's like being animated, like being some sort of like the cultural adaptation of the Frankenstein. It's like, and he just kind of
Right, yeah.
walks and he can't talk, and
Sure.
it's just a scary monster. This, the actual creature is not that in the
No.
book.
This one could tap dance if he wanted to.
If he wanted to. But I could see a movie being really like really cool, and him trying to fight back some sort of consciousness that's trying to fight. Like there's almost like two consciousnesses, or there's memories that are trying to come through, and that's messing with him, his new experiences,
Yeah.
and giving him all the more reason to not understand why society continually rejects him. And the example of the blind guy, like we know the creature's voice wasn't perfect.
Right.
Like it was like a gritty, scary. It startled him when he
Sure.
first
Yeah.
made a
Yeah.
sound. And so this,
But he was
being
written
able to
eloquently. I mean, Shelley wrote him,
right.
and Walton even says, like, I remember Frankenstein warning me that he has this eloquence and this ability to convince you with speech, so I don't need to be tricked by him.
Yeah. And so it's all visual.
Right.
And so there's an argument to be made, if you take away whatever preconceived implicit biases that are triggered by the things that you see, whether or not you want to think them or not. Implicit biases show up and you have to fight them back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then if nobody could see the creature, they would have just accepted him.
Yeah.
And there's an old school Shel Silverstein poem, "We're all the same when you turn out the light." Remember that poem?
Yeah.
As a kid, I was like, oh, so profound. Like, I really thought it was. But it's crazy. I read I don't know if it's a meme or whatever, something that said like your first thought is your cultural conditioning or your implicit bias. It's your second and third thought that's actually who you are. So
interesting.
Being able to control your thoughts and you look at the creature and say, I'm terrified, it's a horrible creature, and be like, wait, maybe that's actually not true. I don't know that. I mean, it doesn't help that he is literally made of dead body parts, probably smells bad and all exactly. Of that. It doesn't help his case. But I don't know. Even though he is made of dead body parts and probably smells like rotten barbecue in the sun, there is a truth to his status as an outsider, period.
Right.
You know?
It's the ultimate outsider because he doesn't even have an outsider group that he belongs to. He is one of one, which is his quest for getting a companion made. You know, he says, if I had some companionship, if I had society of my own, I wouldn't be evil. It will gentle me, and I would have love, and I could be good.
He needs like George and Letty.
Yeah. And he would go off on his own, and he would basically make his own society separate from the society around him because he realized he would never be able to integrate, you know?
Well, then in the end, he makes Victor Frankenstein his companion.
Basically, yeah. With the cat and mouse game that he plays throughout
the because he could have killed him anytime.
Right.
He could have. But then he would have nobody. He'd have no purpose. And so his whole purpose is to be pursued and to evade and to toy with Frankenstein.
Right. I think there are interesting modern Frankensteins to be written where there's the search for purpose. There's the quest for what, why am I here? What do I do absent any other constraints on me? And then I think there's also one where there's a consciousness in the brain, but through whatever reason he can't make the disparate body parts work right. And so there's a fully formed intelligence, trapped within this body that gets rejected and he cannot express through, Anyway, I think those are two good Frankenstein offshoots that are...
Start writing it. Yes, I've read that the 1994 version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the best adaptation and most closely held to the book than any other version. Robert De Niro, I believe, is the creature.
Okay. Interesting. I did not know not heard of that one. So
I remember, I think it's called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I remember when it came out, like 1994.
Because that was when Bram Stoker's Dracula came out. They did the movie, and so probably somebody thought, "Oh, we'll do a Frankenstein."
I think that's also when like Interview with a Vampire came out in 1994.
Yeah, around that time, yeah.
Yeah. Those movies, like in my little fourth grader brain, like I really wanted to see Interview with a Vampire in fourth grade, and it was not appropriate. But I did eventually see it in sixth grade.
Oh. Still
not appropriate. But a neighbor kid who probably I should have been hanging out with.
Story they had it on.
Yeah. It's very much childhood. Still one of my favorite movies to this day. It's a great movie.
Never seen the movie. I did read the book years and years ago.
It's a pretty good book.
Yeah, I thought the book was... Good. I was surprised at how good I was not expecting it to be good. And I quite enjoyed it, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah,
Did you
a lot of good
did you
questions I
find
think out
the
of it.
yeah, did you find the answer to the meaning of life while reading this book?
I mean, it's 42, right? That's
Just 42.
Yeah, it's the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Ah, is it?
You've never read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Oh no.
You haven't? Oh my
No, that
goodness.
joke was totally lost on me and
Totally over your head.
apologize.
All right, well,
Yeah.
all right. You got to read the book anyway. Yeah, no, I don't think it answered anything. Well, I guess maybe you could say it answered it by showing you the negative, right? What's the negative aspect of society? Like we are not meant to live alone. I think Shelley would say
Mm.
that we are meant to live in society with other people, and that gentles us and prevents,
Mm.
evil. I wonder if she would also say that people that do evil aren't truly evil. Like they just do bad. Like the creature did bad things. Like he killed a bunch of people, but he hated himself for it, and he didn't want to do it. But he had no way to get himself out of it once he started doing it.
I think she would also talk about like the hierarchy of evils. Like he killed a bunch of people, and that's bad, but also full rejection from society and having no place and purposely ostracized in how humans treat one another. Like Justina was falsely accused and false, like nothing added up, and they murdered her anyway.
Right, exactly. Well,
And
she did confess at the end, didn't she? Like she gave them a
she did
confession.
under duress. They
Right.
were like, if you don't confess, you're going to go to hell and we won't bring the priest and he won't absolve you. And she
Right,
was like,
which was good enough for
ah,
them back then.
yeah, exactly. So aren't the answers to the questions themselves?
Oh wow, you're going deep there, huh? Put that on Print that on a mug, huh?
My question is, what book is next?
Ah, okay. Well, let's wrap up Frankenstein. You giving it a stayed awake or fell asleep for this one?
Oh my God. I
I
stayed
know.
awake so
I know you
hardcore
did.
for this
I
book
know you
every
did.
time. You know I did.
I know you did. I'm gonna give this one drifting off. I wasn't fully asleep. I don't want to give it a full sleep because I haven't I haven't dissed any of the books we've read so far. I've actually been pleasantly surprised by all the books that we've read, the ones that I hadn't read before. But I recognize its importance, Frankenstein. I recognize the quality of the story and the things that it brings up. But man, I gotta knock it for how tough it was to read. I did not enjoy reading this one. It was rough for me. So I was dozing on this one.
Do you think if you'd read it all in like 1 week versus several months,
I think the fact that it wasn't grabbing me even, like
you weren't compelled?
I wasn't compelled to get through it. Like it was
Oh,
a slog to read it. I was not like looking forward to reading it. This one was a tough read for me. I don't know.
see, I feel the opposite. I felt like extremely compelled. Like I had
Oh
to put it
wow.
down
Yeah,
and I
you
like
sent your
want
chapters
to pick it
way
up.
earlier than I thought you would. You texted me and you're like, "Oh, chapters are up." I'm like, "Whoa, hey, I didn't even read mine yet." All right, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I was reading it I mean, I was reading it on my own before I was like, hey, we should read it for the podcast. And then we
Ah,
did.
okay.
So I was
Wow.
already
I will say I can't imagine rereading this um, on my own just for
this
pleasure.
is I think this is my seventh reread.
Wow. Interesting. I just had a hard time with it. But
Well, it's clear you're wrong, so it's fine. I'm okay that
I
you're
can
wrong.
accept that.
I can accept it.
Well, hopefully, our 13th book will be more compelling and more interesting. It is one neither of us have read, so
Never.
I'm quite interested. I'd never even heard of it
Me either.
prior to a few months ago. But our 13th book is going to be V-Land, or The Transformation, An American Tale by Charles Brockden Brown. And,
Wieland? I thought it was Wyland.
well, Wieland, it's like German pronunciation, Wieland, right? Would you
Is
say
it? It's an
Wieland?
American tale.
So you would say, so do we want to say Wyland then? How do we want to pronounce it? We should,
I mean, it's an American tale.
so we're going to
So,
say Wyland as opposed to Wieland?
Wieland? Wieland?
Wieland. All right, we can say Wyland or Wieland, or how would we say Wieland? Wieland? I don't know.
I don't know. I've been saying Wyland.
Wyland? Okay. All right. Well, we can stick with Wyland. If any listeners have any super strong feelings about whether we go with the straight up German Wieland or an Americanized Wyland, let us know. But I guess we can stick with Wyland. It's how it looks, right? It's
Yeah, and I mean, if it was a German tale, I might feel differently. But it says it's an American
an
tale.
American
So
tale, yeah. And as we all know, Americans love to mispronounce words anyway. I love
I do it all the time.
going to different towns, and you think the town should be pronounced one way, and it's pronounced some other way. Like there's a town. Oh, I don't know where it is. I forget. But there is a town. I think there's a lot of Spanish names that are, like
Mm.
the town is pronounced. It's Rio Grande. No, it's not. No, we pronounce it Rio Grande around here. Okay, you pronounce it Rio Grande. All right, that's the name of your town. Anyway,
If you say so.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's lots of that around. So yeah, we can go with Wieland. So anyway, so Wieland, or The Transformation, An American Tale. That's going to be our next book. I know nothing about it, other than it was. So I came across it. NPR had a summer reading list by state, and this was a public domain book listed for Pennsylvania. So the fun things that we'll see if we get to them, but this book is set in and around Philadelphia in the late 1700s, I believe it takes place, and apparently it name checks a lot of locations. So I think it would be very cool if we could read, descriptions of places that we're reading, and then actually going out and seeing how they've been transformed. How Charles Brockden Brown was seeing America transform, and then we can speed it up by 300 years and see how it really has changed, right? Would blow his Revolutionary era mind, I think.
What I find really interesting, just based on the Wikipedia, because again, I know nothing about this book,
Right.
is it's considered the first American Gothic novel, and apparently has been linked to a book by William Godwin, who is Mary Shelley's daddy.
Oh,
That's her
wow.
dad, William
I
Godwin.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
How is it linked to him?
It says that this book, being that it's an first American Gothic, has often been linked to Caleb Williams, which is a book by William Godwin. And it says Godwin's influence is clear, but Brown's writing is unique in its own style.
Well, good.
So,
I would be very distraught if he wrote in the same style as Mary Shelley, who's probably taught by her
Mary
dad.
Shelley's dad, yeah.
Yeah.
And Gothic fiction, horror, psychological, epistolary. So we'll see.
There we go, epistolary.
Yep, might have some more letters. I've never read
There
it.
you
This
go.
is all the Wikipedia.
I haven't
But I find
either.
it.
Hey, if it's horror, it fits in with October even. That's
It does.
perfect. I didn't even realize. Beautiful.
It is. It's perfect. Major themes: religious fanaticism,
Oh.
sensationalist psychology, ventriloquism,
And
and limits of knowledge.
These are very salient, and then Alfred ventriloquism, maybe not so much.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm actually quite intrigued.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. This could be ventriloquism, huh? All right. This could be like when I read through the other Bram Stoker book, which is not as good as Dracula. We talked about this in the pod before, but The Lair of the White Worm. One of the conceits they use is hypnotism as like this mystical, dangerous thing. They do like hypnotic combat, and it's
Oh,
you know,
hypnotic
I
combat.
know. So it's not as exciting as it sounds. It's a terrible book, but but maybe ventriloquism. Maybe it fits in the same way. Maybe it's this mysterious new thing, and people are scared of
Could be.
ventriloquists. And I don't know. I'm curious. I'm interested. But that'll be so. The first couple chapters of that will drop into your feed next week. So be on the lookout for those. Read along with us if you'd like. You can download the book obviously from Project Gutenberg, as you can get all your good public domain books from there. Anything else to wrap up here for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, book 12?
No, just again, you're wrong, and maybe you just need to read it 7 more times.
Seven more. I don't know. I don't know if I can do even one. It'd be hard pressed to get that. All right, well, this wraps up our episode this week. You can obviously follow us on all of our social medias. We are at CYSTPod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can send us a note via email, cystpod@gmail.com. You can also, please, if you enjoy what we're doing, go out to Apple Podcasts, give us a rating and review there, say something nice, let us know how we're doing. Or on Spotify, you can click on over and give us a star rating there. You can also like and subscribe to our YouTube. You can see all of these discussion episodes on video, and as I mentioned, all of our books are neatly packaged into YouTube playlists for you there as well, so you can get all the books together with all the discussion episodes. So until next time, this is homecoming season, so make sure you vote for your homecoming court, and hopefully we win. Go team.
Peace.